Okay, we all know the business world is, well, it's chaotic, right? Things are always changing. So, how do you even begin to handle the stuff you have zero control over? Well, today we're going to unpack a really powerful strategic tool that helps leaders do exactly that. Let's get into it.
All right, let me ask you a question. What could government tax policy, shifting consumer trends, and say a brand new AI advancement, what could they possibly have in common?
The answer is they are all these huge external forces that can literally make or break a business. And here's the real kicker: you have almost no control over them. None. So, how in the world are you supposed to navigate all that chaos? Well, that's exactly where something called a PESTEL analysis comes into play. Think of it as a strategic framework, a kind of radar that helps you scan that big, uncontrollable horizon and actually make sense of all the giant forces that are going to shape your future. So, here's what we're going to cover. We'll start by scanning the business horizon to get a feel for the framework. Then, we'll break down each of the 6 parts: political and economic, social and technological, and finally, environmental and legal. And at the end, we'll see how it all clicks together. All right, let's kick things off with our first section, scanning the business horizon and introducing the PESTEL framework. So, PESTEL is an acronym, and it's super helpful because it gives us a roadmap. Each letter stands for something. You've got P for political, E for economic, S for social, T for technological, E for environmental, and L for legal. Simple as that. Let's jump into those first two. Okay, our first pair is political and economic forces. I like to think of this as the rules and the wallet. It's all about what the government is doing and what the overall economy looks like. Now, the real power of this framework comes from asking the right questions. For each factor, there's a key strategic question. So for political, we're asking what government actions or big political shifts could totally change the rules of the game for our industry. And for economic, it's all about how could the big picture economy affect our costs, our prices, and, of course, our customers' demand. Let's dig into political factors. We're talking about things like government policy, tax laws, trade agreements, all that stuff. And they can have a massive impact. Just look at India's auto market. When the government brought in these new tax reforms back in 2025, it suddenly made cars way more affordable. And boom, a record surge in sales. A single political decision completely reshaped an entire industry. And see, that political move created this huge economic ripple effect. At the same time, inflation was creeping up in India, and consumers, well, they're smart. They saw an opportunity. People started buying cars as an inflation hedge. Think about that. They were basically locking in the current price on a huge purchase before it went up. It just goes to show you, economic factors don't just affect what people can afford, they can change the entire psychology of why people buy in the first place. Okay, moving on to our next pair, social and technological trends. I called this one People and Progress. It's all about how we behave as a society and the cool new stuff we invent. And just like before, we start with our key questions. For social, we need to ask, what are the demographic trends or cultural shifts that could change who our customers are and why they buy from us? For technological, it's a big one. What new tech is out there that could totally disrupt our products, our operations, our entire business? So, social factors. This is things like cultural norms, population shifts, lifestyle trends. You get the idea. A fantastic example is what happened with electric vehicles in India. They went from being this little niche product to a full-blown green status symbol. And that change wasn't driven by a price drop or a performance boost. It was a deep shift in consumer values about sustainability. That's a social force in action. And, of course, technology is what brought that social trend to life. You see, innovations in the auto industry led to these incredible born electric platforms. What does that mean? It means automakers stopped trying to cram batteries into old gas car designs. Instead, they started from scratch, building EVs from the ground up to be better in every way. That's a huge technological leap that's directly feeding into that social demand for greener cars. All right, that brings us to our final pair, environmental and legal rules. Let's call this one the planet and the policies. So for environmental, the big question is, how are things like the physical environment and sustainability pressures going to affect our operations and our market? And for legal, it's pretty straightforward. What laws, current or pending, could either hold us back or open new doors for how we do business? Environmental factors like climate change, pollution, managing waste, these aren't just sideline issues anymore. They are absolutely central to business strategy. But here's the thing. It's not just about avoiding risks. It's a massive opportunity. The demand for ethically sourced, sustainable products is exploding, and it's creating a totally new way for companies to compete.
And finally, we have legal factors. These are the specific written down rules of the game. A perfect example, again, from the Indian auto industry, is safety standards. These strict ratings used to be just another box to tick, a legal hurdle. But now, companies are actively advertising their high safety ratings. They've turned a legal requirement into a critical competitive advantage to win over customers.
So we've walked through all 6 factors: P, E, S, T, E, and L. But now comes the most important part. How do we put it all together and actually turn this analysis into action?
The single biggest takeaway here is that these factors are all interconnected. They don't exist in their own little silos. They're like a web, or maybe a chain reaction. For example, a political decision on environmental policy can spark new technological opportunities, which then creates new legal challenges. It's all linked. You can't just look at one piece of the puzzle. You have to see how the whole system works together. Now, this often brings up a common question. What's the difference between a PESTEL analysis and the SWOT analysis everyone knows? It's a really important distinction. Think of it this way. PESTEL is your telescope. It scans the big, broad, external world to figure out what's happening around you. It helps you spot the opportunities and threats out there on the horizon. Only after you've done that can you do a SWOT analysis, which is more like a mirror. It looks internally at your company's strengths and weaknesses to figure out, okay, what should we do about it? PESTEL always comes first. When you boil it all down, PESTEL is basically an early warning system. It's what allows a company to be proactive and adapt on purpose, instead of just reacting when a crisis hits. It's about turning those huge, uncontrollable forces into something you can actually anticipate and prepare for. And that really brings us to the final idea. PESTEL isn't just some framework for giant corporations. It's a way of thinking that anyone can use. So I'll leave you with this question. What are the key political, economic, social, or technological forces that are shaping your industry, or maybe even your own career, right now? It's definitely something to think about.